tuarangi, nai mai, hau mai, ki tēnei pō whakaherera. Anei au ka tuku he karakia, ka wātia te pō mō tātou katoa. I tau nei ki rungi a tātou pō te wāro ngā māku tūkura. Nā rātou whakataputa tiara, hei koina ngā tātou nau. I whakatōpi o tātou nā kau tēnā tikanga, ai arataki nei a tātou. Kia nā kau nui ki tātou ai a tātou mai ki ka pō, i roki te pono, i te taga, marutanga, me tētini ki tētini, e rongo whakaria ki runga ki a tina, tina, haumi e hui e, wāhaki. Kauri takua, ki ta wheri kou kou mi tāna rua, te manga pūtake o ngā puna ki raro, tauku haere i raro, i a papa ki te irere mai, i ara pata, paki nā tu ki te pūra, o kou tūro, nau i o kari e, oi ara o kura i rua, ni he me tama, e pau pau ai a kawi ura, o ki atu aku pātu, ki te ipu tangi roi mata o te iwi raia, kopuna hau te rarau tāpu, i ka pāna moa nui ana nai, a kāpeke ki ngā tuata wata o rai o te karaka, kōku pē te teko kei runga ka unuku neke neke ki pēperiki, ki te tonga, te whina wata tukuna o te rangi iwi nui e tāhaere, te rā hoki o ki te uru, ko mua upoko te malo, ko mai te ao te uri, ko tū te moana te tangata i titi, te upoko ki te kura arangi e. Tirei mauri ora.
Kia ora, good evening, welcome. It's a privilege to be able to host everyone here tonight, and we initially wish to thank Ngā Tangata Whenua, our people who have just ceremoniously and very poignantly opened our proceedings for us. We do thank you very much indeed. We appreciate it. My name is Tom Hayes. I'm one of the trustees. There are some housekeeping guidances. Exits are down and at the front or rear of the hall, whichever way you look, but behind you. So make note of where they are. Toilets into that front foyer and to your left. This is your left. Over here. Cell phones, please, if you can put them on mute or turn them off, that would be good. Just one other thing that's not housekeeping but by way of explanation. The QR codes on the plaques, some people not quite sure, QR is a quick response code. So by using your device, you can read the information. Each plaque carries its own QR code. So we just want to make that one clear for you folk. We have a little bit of a unique Horowhenua College situation tonight. We have 3 previous head boys here. We just asked them if they could briefly stand. Philip Ralston, 1967. Thank you, Philip. Bruce Batten, 1969, and also Ducks as well. Thank you, Bruce. Michael Hayes, 1988. Thank you, Michael, over this side here. It's my privilege now to introduce our chair, not these chairs, the chair of our committee, Kerry Gertson. Kerry was the instigator of this idea. We've dragged it kicking and screaming through a lot of meetings, a lot of research, and that will be covered at the appropriate time. So it's now time for Kerry. Thank you. Another piece of housekeeping that I forgot to write it down, but that's afterwards. Photographs for family groups. Don't panic too much when we do the presentations. When we break for supper, you can use any part of the hall to gather your whānau groups, 1 person, 2 people, 20 people photos. All of that can take part afterwards. We've planned for that to happen. So don't despair that you're not going to get a photo op. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I just want to do some acknowledgements before we get into the proceedings. I acknowledge my fellow trustees, and we're the ones all wearing the badges. 2 of our original trustees, Linda Fletcher and the late Darryl Small, and Bernice's wife is here. I want to thank the Horowhenua District Council for supporting us in this project. Acknowledge the Mayor and Mayoress, Bernie and Sharon Wandon, and Sharon's got herself a job tonight too. Deputy Mayor Joe Mason and Councillors Victoria K. Simmons and David Allen. Acknowledge some of the researchers who helped us with the work. Bruce ended up doing most of the writing, but there was Bruce Batten, Bill Kerr, John Dixon, Kevin Miles, Linda Fletcher, Bernard Long, Nolene Lyons, Marjorie Law and Lloyd Dedman. Without any of these people I mentioned tonight won't happen. Particular thanks to Grant Congdon, Principal of Horowhenua College, who has allowed us to use this facility. There's a quid pro quo because Tom and I had to do some research for it. The editors of the Chronicle, the Mail and the Mail 2 Standard was going to be here too. We have some other guests, Corey Kennett, the Chief Executive of the Horowhenua Rugby Union, Adam Haritapa, President of Horowhenua Softball Association, Ross Campbell, President of the Levin Club, and Wayne Kay, President of RSA. Thank you, Michael, who's going to be our usher. Brian Byrne from Harcourts, who has helped sponsor the supper. I'd also like to thank every individual, family, businesses and others who have supported the sponsors of the plaques and also helped sponsor the supper. Jim Duran, he's given us a gift of Osler wines and we thank him there, and our recipients will all be getting a bottle. Horowhenua Learning Centre, Vicky Pettit and the students who are doing our supper for us tonight. And finally, Bazza Watkins, I know he's in the audience here somewhere. He's going to be working tonight to put the plaques out. So I would now invite the Mayor to come and say a few words.
Kia ora tātou. And a very warm Horowhenua welcome to all those that are here tonight, but especially those that have family connections that have returned to hear the story about their heritage. It's fantastic that you have made the effort to be here, and we welcome you very warmly. To the Heritage Trust members, my fellow councillors, staff and members of the Horowhenua community, tonight is a special night. A night where we can start in a public way to acknowledge and recognise those that have shaped our history and made us the district that we are today. I know that this project has been in development for some time now and has always appealed to me right from the start when it was presented to Council way back in June 2019. Firstly, can I acknowledge the huge amount of work that has gone on in the background to get us where we are today. The hours that must have been spent deliberating and researching, contacting families and organising the plaques and their installation, I'm sure it has been a mission. So for all of us to be here tonight and join in this event for this unveiling is a fantastic achievement and one you should all be justifiably proud of. As I mentioned earlier, this Heritage Walk of Fame concept recognises and commemorates significant Horowhenua residents who have contributed in some way to shape the district as we know it today. It is great to hear also that council have supported this project in a practical way with supporting 2 of the plaques, one for the very first mayor and one for the very first town clerk. It is fantastic that we can acknowledge this contribution in a real and practical way. And I'm sure that these plaques will become a big part of who we are and enable especially our young people and new residents to the district of how we respect and acknowledge our past. It's interesting to note that names for future plaques will be gleaned from a public nomination process. I sure wouldn't like to be on that deliberation. Again, our thanks to go to the members of the Horowhenua Heritage Charitable Trust for the considerable work in getting this initiative started. I am looking forward to tomorrow morning to walking Oxford Street and finding out much more about those that have been selected. And I have no doubt that conversation will be spurred as we walk around town and we get to know those that have made that difference in our place. This will be a wonderful addition to our townscape, and once again my congratulations to all involved. Thank you.
The part that we've all been waiting for, obviously, is to see the plaques, hear the information, watch the visuals, and it's my privilege and pleasure now to call on Bruce Batten, who will do a series of introductions. Thank you, Bruce.
This really is a special honour for me to be part of the celebrations tonight as a Horowhenua College old boy from the 1960s. In this very hall, rehearsing for the Rose in the Ring, Pirates of Penzance, sitting school cert, and taking part in college debates and public speaking competitions. It's things like that that make it the man, and I'm very, very proud to have that connection to Horowhenua College. Just before I begin the introductions, I just want to make it clear that tonight we have time only for painting a very brief pen portrait of our Walk of Fame stars and their achievements. Much more detail about them can be found on our website from tomorrow, and that website, very easy to remember, www.hh.org.nz. So we begin. Virtually everyone who's grown up in this district at least recognises the name Hector MacDonald, and he and his wife Agnes are indeed legend. The first Europeans to come into the Horowhenua to settle, and for a long time the only ones. Hector, Agnes, and their first 4 children moved from Otaki to Hokio Beach in 1858. This to set up a base from which to develop their extensive leasehold land that covered 12,000 acres from Ohau through to Ruatafo, and also to build an accommodation house at Hokio to service the Cobb & Co coaches that ran up and down the beachfront from Wellington to Homonui with passengers and mail. And this was in the days long before there was an inland road. Hector and Agnes each came from Scotland, but they met in Wellington. Hector had arrived as a whaler, setting up a station on Kapiti and establishing friendly relations with the area's dominant chief, Te Rauparaha. Agnes emigrated to New Zealand as a young woman travelling companion to the wife of a wealthy landowner. Together, Hector and Agnes and their final tally of 11 children integrated seamlessly with Mōpoko and Ngāti Rauparaha. They helped resolve land disputes between them. They embraced the native tongue. Agnes ran the local mail service and administered to the sick for 40 years with her medical skills. Hector employed local Maori on the farm, and he became this area's first representative on Manawatu's county council. They made white settlers' first agreeable imprint on Horowhenua, one that opened the way for others to come in 30 years later, as you hear, to establish the makings of Levin and its surrounds. And tonight, Hector and Agnes's great-grandson, Murray Griffin, who lives here in Levin, has come along to accept their plaque. So Murray, would you please come forward? You just hold it up to everybody there. John Cabell. John would be one of the next Europeans to settle in the Horowhenua following the MacDonalds. He came in 1874. His father and uncle were among the earliest colonists to New Zealand. They arrived from England in 1841. They established a sawmill and flour mill between Foxton and Shannon, powered by a steam engine they imported, the first to come into New Zealand. John joined them out here as a teenager in 1856. He partly bought and partly leased nearly 3,000 acres of land on the north side of the Ohau River, stretching from the coast into Moanoa East. He built a homestead, Te Rauawa, near the beach, with immaculate workshops and stables, gardens and lawns. Scrubby dunes were cleared, marshes drained to graze 4,000 sheep and a herd of shorthorn cattle. Once this was established, John turned to local politics, road building being his big focus. First, he took over Hector MacDonald's position as Horowhenua Riding's sole representative on Manawatu County Council. This was after Hector MacDonald's sudden death. And he then lobbied successfully for Horowhenua to become a separate county, which it did in 1885, and John Cabell was one of the original 7 Horowhenua County Councillors. He served several years as chairman, and his influence contributed to a main road through Horowhenua being mostly laid by 1896. Otherwise, he was the first chairman of Ohau Schools Committee, and he granted the land next door for the Anglican Church in Ohau, built in 1904. Sadly, tragedy blighted his life. His 2 eldest daughters had been drowned together the same day in Ohau River in 1890. And his only son died at Gallipoli in World War I. So with no heir, John sold up in Ohau and lived out his final years with his wife Mary Grace at Naumai, a grand home on Winchester Street in Levin. Tonight, his great-grandson Dennis Kakori has made the trip up from Wellington to receive the plaque on behalf of John. Dennis, would you please come forward? The name Peter Bland Bartholomew lives on to this day. The fourth generation of Peters farms locally on Waitariri Beach Road. His great-grandfather established Levin's first sawmill, more or less where Roslyn Road runs parallel with our main road north. And the nearby homestead he built at Kauri in Totara in 1889 for his wife and family of 10 is still occupied. It's often been called the Morgan Homestead, after another family who later lived there. Peter was another Scotsman who made his mark on the North Island's lower west coast. A genuine pioneer who built the first sawmills in both Palmerston North and Fielding before seeking cutting rights in the untouched Horowhenua. He began operations here in March of 1888. Levin's first railway station was erected nearby to give workers access to the mill and for the mill to dispatch timber to Wellington and abroad. Disputes with Mopoko over timber rights were resolved through the Maori Land Court, and when this area was milled out by 1895, a new plant was built at Werowoa, behind Gypsy Caravan's site today. In these blocks, Bartholomew's worked in tandem with the Prouses, who were on the eastern side of the railway line. By 1916, all millable timber was gone, and the sawmills were done. And Peter himself lived for only another 2 years. An obituary described him as a man of great business capacity, tireless energy and upright character, who did his part worthily to lay the foundations of settlement in this section of the Dominion. Through marriage, there are enduring connections to 2 other of our pioneering families, the MacDonalds and also the Rose. Tonight, great-grandson of Peter Bland Bartholomew I, Peter Allen, is here to accept the slightly older Peter's plaque. Please come forward, Peter. So this leads us smoothly on to Frederick George Rowe. He was Peter Bartholomew's brother-in-law and would become the Bartholomew Sawmill's manager when it began operations in Levin in 1888. Fred was born in Wellington in 1859 into a family of printers, publishers and later hoteliers. His father Charles built and ran the Denby Hotel in Fielding, and it was there that Fred first met Peter Bartholomew, who was a boarder at that hotel, and he worked for Peter in Fielding before moving to the new mill in Levin. Fred had a business brain of his own. From his office at the mill, handily placed near the railway, he traded goods and groceries to the workers and took on duties as the town's first postmaster. With his older brother, he built the first hotel, the Levin, on the corner of Oxford and Queen Streets, and he later took over the Werowoa Hotel briefly. He also farmed at Werowoa with a group of fellow farmers and businessmen, and he launched the Levin Meat and Cold Storage Company in 1906, building our first slaughterhouse and freezing facility and exporting meat as far as London. Fred was passionate about education. He fought valiantly for Massey College to be located here at CD Farm before losing out to Palmerston North. What a big loss that was. For many years, he was chairman of Levin District High School Committee. He also served the Levin Racing Club, the Tennis Club, and the A&P Association. And he was a Levin Borough Councillor from 1923 through to 1935. With his wife Millie, Fred had 5 children, and remarkably, the youngest of those, Pat, is still alive and well. She is, in her heyday, and she's still a bright spark living in the War Veterans Home here in Levin at the age of 97. Well, it's probably not surprising that she can't be here with us tonight. However, an interview with Pat about her dad and their life will be on our website soon. It's been recorded already. And in her stead, her granddaughter, Penny Rowe, Penny Parsons, is here to receive Fred's plaque. So come forward, Penny, and we'd like you to say a few words as well, please. No, I'm only joking. Prior told me to say that. try a lot with pioneers. I'm going to hand over to my trusty colleague, Kevin Miles now. And he's going, yes, is that the way we're going to do it? No? Kevin also has a very strong connection with Horowhenua College, and I told you.
He's just gazumped. I'm sorry. No worries.
Thanks very much, Bruce. Yes, I had the privilege to teach at this college for 24 years. I came to Horowhenua in 1980. The principal at the time came and knocked on my door. I was living in Kawera Road and said he wanted the head of biology. So being a young teacher at Manawatu College, I thought great opportunity, and I stuck it through here till 2004. So it was very enjoyable time of my life. I have a lot of pleasure in presenting or going through the next 5 biographies. And the first one here is Hannah Stickles. She was born in Port Jackson, Sydney, Australia in 1839. Her family was one of a number of families created along the lower North Island's west coast by unions between Pakeha whalers and Maori women. Her father traded between Sydney and the Cook Strait whaling settlements. Her mother was from Ngāti Hariri Hapu of Nuapoto, who occupied land on the southern shore of Lake Horowhenua. In 1861, she married Joseph Retta.
Kevin, excuse me, can you...
Sorry?
I've come forward and push the mic. We just haven't got projection on the boards.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
In 1861, she married Joseph Retta. Over the next 22 years, they had 8 children. In 1871, Joseph took up work on the Rangatiki estate of William Taylor. However, in 1886, there came a chance of independence. Through her mother, Hannah had rights to a small block of land by Lake Horowhenua, and so they decided to settle there. They became largely self-sufficient. Her eldest son, Fred, bought a Levin town section and setting up as a butcher. In 1900, Christina Prowse persuaded Hannah to become attached to Dr. Mackenzie's practice as a maternity nurse for the district. She had a natural aptitude and a cheerful and kind disposition, which made her presence welcome in many homes. Hannah, a devout Anglican, gave self-sacrificing service to the growing Levin community and entered fully into its life. Hers was an open home. To Levin, she was Granny Retta, who cared for generations of mothers and babies. She died at the age of 100 in 1940. And I'd like to invite Briar Rowe, the great-great-granddaughter, to receive the plaque. Emma Roberts was born in West Ham, Essex, England in 1848. Her family immigrated to Australia when she was very young. In 1868, she married William Osler in Melbourne. They moved to North Otago and then a sheep station in South Canterbury in 1874. They had 4 children, one of whom died in infancy. In 1879, William was killed in an accident. Consequently, Emma lost the farm and her financial situation became dire. In 1888, however, her daughter won a ballot for 20-acre section in Levin, which she sold on to her mother. This land, bounded today by MacArthur Street and Queenwood and Bartholomew Roads, became the site of the Cashmere homestead. They cleared away the bush, they built fences, they protected the giant trees surrounding the Tikama clearing. Over the next 20 years, Emma astutely purchased other land. Her 21-year lease of the gravel pit area was very profitable.
It was the ideal frontage for Oxford Street, and shopkeepers leased land from her. Eventually, the Borough Council purchased the land in 1910. Emma was a woman of strong convictions. She was a staunch supporter of women's suffrage, the New Zealand Women's Christian Temperance Union, and the New Zealand Alliance, which campaigned for the abolition of liquor. She was a very strong advocate for equality and for women's education. In 1914, Emma moved to Wellington to be closer to family, and then to Auckland, where she finally died in 1922. She was described in an eulogy by the then Premier, Sir Robert Stout, as a calm, deliberate, sincere, courageous and intelligent person and one of New Zealand's greatest pioneers. And I'd like to invite Sue Morgan, also a great-great-granddaughter, to receive the plaque. Christina McIlbride was born in Horowhenua in 1860. Her parents came to New Zealand in 1856, settling on a 20-acre farm in Horowhenua, which because of its site became the local post office. From the age of 12, Christina would ride over the hill to Lower Hutt twice weekly, in all weathers. In 1879, at age 19, she married a local Richard Prowse, a member of a family of sawmill owners. Because of the dangerous nature of the work, she set about learning how to treat injuries and illnesses. In 1891, the family moved to Levin, so the Prowse brothers could set up a new mill. Christina had an amazing capacity for work. She had no time for idle chatter, but she was also renowned for her understanding and wit. She became a skilled bush surgeon, nurse and midwife to the community, and attended people in all conditions whenever her knowledge and skills were needed. And she is thought to have delivered hundreds of babies. Christina was matron of the Werro Soldiers Hospital during World War I and sub-matron of the local influenza hospital during the 1918 pandemic. She became known affectionately as Granny Prowse. Christina loved her flowers, her native flora, and she battled to preserve the native bush around their homestead. She bequeathed to the people of Levin the Prowse Bush Reserve. Christina and Richard had 9 children, 3 of whom died very young. The couple had a common interest as foundation members of the Methodist Church, but she had other interests: the St John's Ambulance Brigade, the Levin Horticulture Society, and the Native Flora Club. Christina died in 1951 at the age of 91. And I'd like to invite Susan Snedden, the great-granddaughter, to receive the plaque. Thank you. Walter Mace Clark was born in Wellington in 1870. His father, William, and Uncle Joseph had arrived in New Zealand in 1840 as young children to the care of their aunt, Louisa Fitchett. In 1854, William started a drapery business in Wellington. When Walter left school, he joined his father in the business. After a year, he went off to Australia, and he returned 2 years later to a job with James Smith of Te Aro House. He was placed in charge of men's clothing and tailoring. He then worked for the firm as a traveller, and he travelled to the Hawke's Bay and various parts there, eventually transferring to South Taranaki, where he met Maud Phillips, whom he later married in 1895. But in 1892, Walter opened a branch of Te Ara House in